So today I'm going to review this, my Sonder Broken Road TI Pinion. So this is the bike that in 2023 I rode from Banff in Canada to Antelope Wells in New Mexico along the Great Divide mountain bike route, 2,700 miles, mainly off-road. This isn't going to be a technical review. I'm more into the riding than the gear. This is going to be my thoughts about the bike, how it worked for me, why I selected it, all of that stuff. Hopefully that's what you're looking for. So there are a couple of deviations from the standard spec when it comes to this bike. Obviously I've swapped some components out. You can configure these things however you want, and Alpkit are pretty good when it comes to swapping components in and out. We'll get into details about that later. In general though, the frame, the drive chain, the wheels, most of this bike is standard, and I will point out where there are changes. When I decided to ride the Great Divide mountain bike route, I was a novice. I wasn't into bike packing. I wasn't really a cyclist. So when I was selecting the bike for that trip, I wanted something lightweight, easy to work on. They were my two biggest criteria. I'd seen Ryan Van Duzer ride that particular route, and he had the Pinion gearbox. So that was my first decision. I knew that I wanted that from the off, and that limited the amount of bikes that I could choose from. The bike is titanium. I like that because it's a raw finish. There's no paint to chip. It doesn't rust. It apparently flexes like steel, but is as light as aluminium. This particular one, I've checked it all over. All of the welds are very impressive. I mean, I can't see any flaws or faults at all with it. So yeah, I really like that. It's a size large. This bike in this configuration weighs 14.5 kilos. The geometry for this bike, again, I'm not an expert. As far as from my research, I discovered that this is quite a relaxed riding position, which was good for me because I'm not, going to be doing any crazy single track. There was some on that route, but I'm very slow on that. I wanted something that was comfortable, tough, solid. Of course, because it's a bike packing bike, I wanted mounting points, and there are mounting points all over the place on this bike. You've got 3 there, 2 here. You can mount obviously mud guards and things like that, or racks. Plenty of mounting points, which is great when you're bike packing, of course. So I had bags all over this thing. Maybe Ross will splice in a picture of this bike in its loaded guise. It has internal cable routing, so that's for the brakes, for the shifters, and you can fit a dropper post. I would probably never do a dropper post, but anyway, I like that as well because when you're mounting bags, you're not getting snagged up on cables or pinching them. And of course, if you're laying the bike on the ground or banging into stuff, you're less likely to damage the cables. Again, low maintenance was a prime factor. So I mentioned earlier on, I wanted the Pinion gearbox, and that's because it's a sealed gearbox, 0 maintenance. It's coupled with this Gates carbon belt drive, so there was no chain lube, no fear of the chain breaking. 0 maintenance, basically. Every 10,000 kilometers or 6,000 miles, you need to change the oil, and that's pretty much it for this. The belts last longer than a chain. I always carry a spare anyway, just in case. It comes as standard with a chain, but you can upgrade to a belt, which is what I did. That's about £300 extra. We haven't gone into prices yet, so just bear that in mind when I do. The shifter is a handlebar based one, 12 speed with no overlap between the gears, so they're 12 unique gears. There's a 600% gear range, which is really wild. You can shift into any gear with this gearbox whilst you're moving or completely stationary, so you can go from gear 1 to 12 from a standstill. And that is such a big deal. I mean, for me, just as a novice especially, it made life so much easier for me. 30-tooth front, 30-tooth rear sprockets, which don't really, it's not relatable if you are used to normal cassettes, because of course it all depends on the gearing inside. Any downsides to it? Not really, I don't think. I suppose you could say that if the belt snaps and you haven't got a spare, you're in trouble, because it's highly unlikely you're going to be able to get one from most bike shops. I always carry a spare, as I said. It can get a little bit noisy. Sometimes it starts squeaking, but all you got to do is clean it. I just used to wet it down, and it was fine. It takes a little bit of setting up because you have to make sure it's straight. The wheel, I should say, is straight in the bike. Otherwise, the belt can twist and pop off or be levered off if sticks or things get jammed in there. That happened a couple of times to me. That was because I hadn't really figured out how to align it. Now I have, and I do it visually. It's not that difficult. You have adjusters on the rear, which you can twist in and out and set and twist. That's like a fairly standard way of adjusting. It's similar to motorbikes. If you have a motorbike, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's a brake here so you can get the belt on and off, because you know you don't have you can't break the belt like you do a chain. But that's nicely designed. I've not had to do it, thankfully. I had no problems with this, and I'm a massive fan. I would definitely have one of these gearboxes on all my bikes if I could afford it. So forks, this is where we get to the first deviation, I suppose, from the standard spec. At the moment, if you go on their website, you'll see that this comes with RockShox Reba RL forks, suspension forks. It can also be specified with their own carbon Pathfinder fork. Now, when I bought mine, they didn't have the Pathfinder fork, so I had to buy, I think this is, well, I know this is a Whiskey number 9 fork. It was very expensive. If they'd have had their own one, I would have done it because it was cheaper. I'm sure it would have been fine. I went with a rigid fork, again, for maintenance, ease of maintenance, or zero maintenance. I didn't want to have to rebuild suspension forks. I don't know whether I would have needed to. Nobody else seems to, but from what I'd read, you're supposed to. I didn't miss the suspension fork. There was some, you know, if you're going over washboard, that sort of surface, then yeah, it's a pain in the arse. But in general, I'm happy with these. The forks do flex a little bit, and you know, for what I do, I'm not going crazy again on single track, anything like that. I would never use that bike for that. And if I find myself on it on a trail, I just go nice and slow. Also, with a rigid fork, it's easier to mount things like cages and, you know, accessories, things like that. This is a Velo Orange Mojave bottle cage. So I know people are going to ask. This fits the large clean canteens or Nalgene bottles. On the other side, I've got a tail fin cage, so I can just put anything on that. So brakes, it comes at the moment with SRAM guide 4-piston calipers. Mine has the SRAM G2R. I've checked that out and they look very similar. I don't know whether one's replaced the other, but all good. Hydraulic, I mean, as far as I know, these are supposed to be good brakes, and they were perfectly adequate for me. I mean, more than adequate. I would say I've not adjusted them, touched them. I haven't bled the fluid. I haven't done anything to these brakes, and they still work as well. Well, they feel like they work as well as when I set off, when the bike was new. So I'm very happy in that regard. Not really any complaints. So you probably noticed I have different handlebars. I have these Velo Orange Crazy Bags. I like these horns. Nicely swept back. I like these handlebars. It came as standard with Sonder Aspect, a Sonder Aspect riser, which is just your standard, everyday, slight raise, slight sweep. I mean, probably fine enough, but for me, I wanted these, and amazingly, I used them more than I thought. I'm very happy with these handlebars, very comfortable. The saddle, that's a personal thing. Obviously, it came with a saddle called the Sonder Abode. I've put that on another bike, and it's fine. I mean, it works well. It's a little narrow for me. I've gone with the Ergon SMC, the medium to large one. There's a review on the channel. I might link that below as well, so you can have a look at that. So another change that I made was with the seat post. This is an EE Silk Plus, the aluminium version. It just gives you a small amount of suspension in there. It's a little rubber polymer thing. You can see what I mean. It came with just a standard seat post, which again, perfectly adequate, just aluminium. Sure, it's fine, but I chose to upgrade it to this thing, and I'm glad I did. Pedals are the same as on all my bikes. MKS Lambdas, they're excellent. They last, the bearings last. Nice big platform, nice and grippy. For flat shoes, that is, which is what I wear. So, wheels. It came as standard with the Sonder Alpha 27.5-inch wheels. I had no issues with these. They're fairly lightweight, I think. Obviously not as light as carbon. I wanted 27.5-inch because I didn't really get the difference between that and 29-inch. I know there are advantages, disadvantages. It wasn't a big deal to me. I like the fact that I can get 3-inch tyres on this bike if I want to, which makes it semi-fat bike. I never have. I'm running 2.6-inch tyres, and the ones that are going to replace these will be 2.6-inch as well. I think that's probably wide enough. Anyway, it's nice to have the option. This was built with a Sonder Juice dynamo, which has worked fine. I mean, it was good enough when I was away to keep my Wahoo bike computer and my Garmin InReach SOS device charged all the time. So yeah, I was glad I had that fitted, and they did that for me before they shipped it. So, there you have it. Conclusions. I am very happy with this bike. I'm glad it's the one I went with. Everything worked well. The bike performed flawlessly. I always think, what would happen if this bike was stolen or broke or something? Would I buy another? Yes, I would. I wouldn't even look or anything else. This is what I would get. Pricing, forgot that. The RRP at the moment is £4,149, $5,149, which for a Pinion bike is about right. And for a Pinion bike made of titanium, I think is very, very reasonable. The additions to mine made it a little more expensive, but you don't need to do those, obviously. And if you do, that's going to be personal. So I can't really speak for that. But yes, I love the bike. You can see this bike in action. If you look in the link below, you can see all of my GDMBR trip. And if you subscribe to that channel, you will shortly see this bike do the Tour Aotearoa, which is a bike packing ride the length of New Zealand. Apache helicopter, that is, if you're interested. Hopefully this is audible. I'll see you again soon. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.